With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown.
And I am Yulana Weeks.
Our top stories.
NEVLEC considers other renewable energy options whilst geothermal is pursued. Burning scent forces a shutdown of electrical grid in St. Kitts.
Update on dengue and arboviral diseases in St. Kitts and Nevis and the Caribbean. St. Kitts and Nevis carnival preparations heating up for Sugar Mass 53. Guyana President announces 10% retroactive salary increase for public servants. Political leader of the New National Party and leader of the opposition in Grenada, Dr. Keith Mitchell, appears to be bowing out of frontline politics. Tbilisi protests demand Georgia election rerun and EU talks as police and protesters adapt tactics. Now, the details.
As the climate crisis escalates, the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis is focusing on the transition from conventional energy to renewable sources of energy. Nevis, in particular, has considerable geothermal potential that is being exploited. Nevis's lone electricity supplier, NEVLEC, is moving ahead with other renewable energy projects to meet short-term power demands. On Budget Day, December 3, the Premier of Nevis, Mark Brantley, reported on plans to install solar energy panels on government buildings and upgrade the wind farm to increase the island's energy generation capacity.
NEVLEC is actively pursuing several other renewable energy projects to address our short-term capacity needs. These include the development of a large solar PV project to be located at Maddens to assist in meeting short-term demand and reduce the likelihood of power outages. The management of NEVLEC is also in discussion with the owners of the existing wind farm to improve its output and modernize its existing equipment. Moreover, plans are well advanced and funding has already been secured to finance the installation of rooftop solar PV on government facilities, including government buildings with high energy consumption and at our water pumping stations.
In the proposal of the Geothermal Energy Transition Project, St. Kitts and other neighboring islands are expected to benefit. The Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, the K&K Group and Siemens Energy, based in the United Arab Emirates, have been working with the government of St. Kitts and Nevis to help the country diversify its energy source.
As it relates to our own geothermal project, which represents the cornerstone of Nevis's and the Federation's commitment to renewable energy, my government has already secured significant financing from the Caribbean Development Bank towards the drilling of geothermal production and reinjection wells. I'm happy to report that despite many setbacks, the project is now progressing well. The tender for drilling contractors has been sent out, and a number of inter-regional and international contractors have been shortlisted to bid for the project. The return of the bid documents is projected for February 2025. It should be noted that this is the second round of bidding, following a first round which resulted in the receipt of 3 bids, none of which met our requirements. At the completion of that unsuccessful exercise, there was a consultation with top firms in the industry. Following that exercise, there was a revision of the bidding document to address issues raised during that consultation.
According to Premier Brantley, none of the 3 bids received in the first round of the bidding process met the requirements, hence the need for a second bidding process.
The next steps, Madam President, will include site visits by prospective bidders, scheduling pre-bid meetings with shortlisted firms in January to address any further queries or concerns, return of bid documents in February 2025, evaluation of those bids, and approval of a selected firm, immediately followed by the execution of the contract with the successful bidders, and finally, the commencement, long-awaited commencement of the drilling process. The final timelines in relation to the above list of activities will no doubt depend on the number and quality of bids received. The design of the geothermal power plant will also depend on the outcome of the drilling program. However, we will be requesting expressions of interest from suitable firms during the first quarter of the new fiscal year to begin to sensitize them about this project. Financing towards the construction of the power plant and overall grid upgrades is already being sourced from the CDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, IDB, and the Green Climate Fund, GCF, with whom I met recently here in Nevis. It is expected that the plant will be developed based on a private-public partnership.
St. Kitts electrical grid was shut down between 5 and 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, December 10, plunging the whole island into a blackout. Energy Minister Conris Maynard said workers observed a burning scent coming from the main feeder room at the Newscast power plant and shut the grid down to investigate. Overnight, the St. Kitts Electricity Company restored power to all feeders. The company issued a statement confirming, quote, "After a thorough investigation, our teams were able to locate the cause of the fault using new technologies recently procured as part of our safety and preventative program," unquote. The situation occurred in the feeder room, which was aggravated by a fire and caused a major blackout in 2020. The St. Kitts and Nevis Fire and Rescue Services was summoned to the site as per standard procedure. In a discussion with Minister Maynard, Skellec's engineering manager, Mr. Kenrod Roberts, said the largest generator is about 40 years old and the second largest has reached its peak year of limitation, 25 years.
So what we have now is some old generators. What's the age of the oldest?
Okay, I think the oldest is about 40 years.
40?
40.
Wow.
Yes.
That is like what, 15 years overdue?
The general limitation is 25 years, so that's
Right.
15 years over the expected lifetime.
That's a lot. And so
The second largest, our largest unit is 25 years.
Right. So that is also at the end of its life. So, and that's the challenge. Those have to be replaced. So you have to invest in that. It's just a must if you're going to provide reliable service.
Minister Maynard said the government is making the necessary investment to upgrade the power plant alongside the solar energy system in hopes of increasing the island's energy generation capacity.
So we're making those investments. That process is going well actually. There's the procurement has been out. That process is ongoing to upgrade the facility here in addition to the solar energy options that we have.
Maynard added that it is difficult to maintain the old generators because their parts are no longer being made and workers would have to fabricate the parts to get them functioning. The minister said new generators are being overrun because Skelec does not have enough generation capacity. The island's limited power generation infrastructure had not been upgraded for years, but in October 2024, a 6-megawatt temporary power generating plant was commissioned to allow for repairs and upgrades to aging generators. Skelec was also promised a US $40 million 18-megawatt dual-fuel generator to be installed at the Newscast power plant through a funding agreement between the Saudi Fund for Development and the government of St. Kitts and Nevis.
At a recent press conference hosted by the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, significant updates on outbreaks of dengue fever and other arboviral diseases in the Caribbean were discussed. Dr. Jarbas Barbosa, the director of PAHO, highlighted that the region is facing an unprecedented dengue epidemic, with 2024 marking the largest outbreak since monitoring began in 1980. The alarming trend has raised concerns among public health officials, particularly in areas like St. Kitts and Nevis, where local populations are vulnerable to severe dengue impacts. Dr. Thais dos Santos, Regional Advisor in Surveillance and Control of Arboviral Diseases, also addressed the impact that dengue outbreaks could have on tourism-dependent countries like St. Kitts and Nevis.
In terms of economies that are highly dependent on tourism, I think that the strategies for preventing the disease and controlling the disease are not different than from economies that are based on other sectors. I think that the recipe is the same, which is, attempt to reduce transmission, and for those persons that develop the disease, prevent them from becoming severe cases and deaths. I think that I mentioned earlier that we use surveillance data in order to prioritize where we can be most effective in our vector control interventions. And I think that for economies that are highly dependent on tourism, a prioritization scheme might be those areas where tourists are available. But this is not to say that schools, healthcare facilities, and other places should not also be prioritized to prevent the circulation, because if transmission is slowed down in the population in general, it would also be slowed down among tourists.
Highlighting the severity of the current dengue situation, Dr. Barbosa revealed that over 12.6 million cases have been reported across the Americas in the current year, nearly 3 times the previous record in 2023. Fatalities have escalated, with over 7,700 deaths attributed to this mosquito-borne disease. The press conference emphasized the alarming number of severe dengue cases among children. In several countries, including Costa Rica, more than a third of cases and over 70% of dengue-related deaths in Guatemala have involved children under the age of 15. Health officials are particularly concerned about the influence of environmental factors such as climate change, urbanization, and inadequate sanitization, which have provided optimal conditions for mosquito breeding.
This increase in cases is directly associated with climatic events, including droughts, floods, and warmer climates that favor the proliferation of mosquito breeding sites. Rapid population growth, unplanned urbanization, and living conditions with inadequate water supply, insufficient sanitation, and poor waste management are also driving the spread. Despite these challenges, we are not defenseless against dengue.
PAHO has enacted an integrated management strategy for the prevention and control of arboviral diseases in response to the surge in dengue cases. This strategy encompasses vector surveillance, enhanced case management, and community engagement efforts. Dr. Thais dos Santos, Regional Advisor in Surveillance and Control of Arboviral Diseases, reassured the public that the strategy aims to minimize severe cases through improved patient management and education on vector control. Like many Caribbean nations, St. Kitts and Nevis remains a concern during this regional health crisis. The government of St. Kitts and Nevis has been urged to reinforce vector control measures and raise public awareness regarding preventative health practices. Despite introducing dengue vaccines in Argentina, Brazil, and Peru, PAHO officials noted that these vaccines alone will not halt the spread in the short term.
While the current dengue vaccine can be a valuable tool for improving community protection and individual outcomes, it will not stop the spread of the virus in the short to medium term, and it does not provide immediate relief during an outbreak.
Health authorities in St. Kitts and Nevis are encouraged to mobilize resources and strengthen community-based initiatives to combat this ongoing health threat as dengue cases continue to rise. The effectiveness of prevention measures will largely depend on cohesive efforts at all levels, from local governments to individual citizens. On December 10, 2024, Carnival Secretariat Director Clement Monarch Ogaro appeared on WINN's Island Tea Sugar Fix segment to continue discussions on Sugar Mass 53 festivities, which include the highly anticipated opening of Carnival 2024-2025 and the Midnight Escape. Ogaro kicked off the announcement by focusing on the Calypso semifinals set for Thursday, December 12th at Sugar Apple.
We have our Calypso semifinals. That's the Carib Calypso semifinals.
Ogaro stated, sharing that the gates would open at 7 p.m. and admission would be $20 paid at the gate, as no advanced tickets would be available. When asked about traffic arrangements for Carnival's opening on Friday, December 13th, Ogaro explained the collaborative effort with the Creative Economy team led by Creative Economy Director Robertine Webb.
What they've done is combine the Midnight Escape, which would have taken place on Christmas Eve the last 2 years, with the opening of Carnival.
Revelers can expect festivities to grace the Bay Road in front of Rams, where a stage for performers will be set up alongside vendor booths stretching past the circus towards Fort Street.
So it's going to be a big grand night.
The director also provided insights into the myriad of performances slated for Friday night.
Shana is going to be there, Statics. One of the hits on the opening. You guys need to listen to what Tubap will be presenting. I think it's really, really special.
Participants from the Miss St. Kitts Queen pageant and the Republic Bank's talented teen are expected to make appearances, adding to the night's entertainment. Ogaro expressed excitement about the newly revitalized Carnival Village, which will host numerous events throughout the Carnival season. The Carnival director continues to encourage locals and visitors to support the Digicel Soca Monarch which features both groovy and power categories. In a touching moment dedicated to youth, Ogaro celebrated the resurgence of the Junior Calypso competition. He underscored the significance of supporting the next generation of Calypso talent, stating,
"And we want you to come out and support these kids." As you just heard Madea, and how powerful she is. Well, there are lots of other powerful acts on the show as well. The reigning secondary king, Starboy Nicholas, saw him working the stage last night for the opening. And his first runner-up, Mighty J. Both are performing on the opening as well. So Mighty J is also the reigning Culturama Junior Calypso monarch. So there's lots of excitement, lots of young talent out there, and we're looking forward to getting great support again for the next generation of Calypsonians in St. Kitts Nevis.
With 14 competing Calypsonians, his enthusiasm for the upcoming show was palpable. As the conversation turned to logistics, Ogaro confirmed that arrangements are in place to facilitate smooth entrance to the events, including the designation of West and East gates in Carnival Village. He emphasized that these logistics would be communicated through formal announcements ahead of the events. As the interview wrapped, Ogaro shared an optimism for the Sugar Mass festivities, which are steeped in culture and community spirit. With a host of planned entertaining events and a cherished sense of community and culture at its heart, the St. Kitts Nevis Carnival season promises to be memorable. Residents and visitors alike are encouraged to participate in this vibrant celebration of life, music, and tradition as Sugar Mass 53 kicks off. In regional news, Guyana President announces 10% retroactive salary increase for public servants, Guyana News source reports.
President Irfan Ali has announced an across-the-board 10% retroactive salary increase for public servants for this year, along with an 8% increase for next year. He made the announcement while addressing senior police officers at their Christmas breakfast event. The president said a 2-year agreement covering 2024 and 2025 was struck between the Guyana Public Service Union and the government.
Further, we have been able to agree with the union that 2025 will also see an increase in the salary of public servants of 8%. So we signed a 2-year agreement with 10% this year, 8% next year, and that of course will take that cumulative increase much higher.
And the president also announced salary adjustments for some categories of public sector workers. Public servants on scales 1 to 6 with a minimum of 4 years of service within the current scale will be moved to the midpoint of that scale, resulting in an increase of their salaries for as much as 13%. This will be effective from July of this year. Additionally, public servants on GS 1 to 6 with a minimum of 8 years of service within the current scale will be moved to the maximum of that scale, seeing an increase as much as 26% for some of them. Further, public servants at a minimum of scale 7 to 8 upon obtaining 4 years of service will be paid a monthly amount equivalent to the nominal difference of the midpoint of scale number 6. The president also announced the introduction of qualification incentives effective next month. Public servants with ACCA qualifications will be paid $15,000 monthly on their salaries, while those with a master's degree will get an additional $22,000, and those with a PhD will get an additional $32,000 monthly on their salaries.
This is in keeping with our commitment of incentivizing education, incentivizing training, and the development of our human capital. Additionally, a 5,000 annual increase in uniform allowance for current eligible categories of health workers, and also a 10,000 increase for public servants, resulting in an increase of as much as 77% in this allowance.
There will also be a housing allowance of $35,000 for public servants and secondment transfer to hinterland locations as of January of this year. And there will be an 8% allowance for public servants stationed in riverine and hinterland areas. Public servants will also see an increase in their motorcar and travel allowances, the president announced.
Political leader of the New National Party and leader of the opposition in Grenada, Dr. Keith Mitchell, appears to be bowing out of frontline politics. Grenada Broadcasting Network has the details.
Roland Bowler, General Secretary of the main opposition New National Party, has confirmed that only 2 persons are in the race to become the new political leader of the party, and there is no nomination from the floor on convention day for the position. The NNP has scheduled December 15th for the convention, overdue by approximately 2 years.
At the close of or the deadline when you could have dropped in your application, there were only 2 applicants in the name of Honorable Peter David and the Honorable Emmeline Pierre.
He further explained that the position of political leader is the only position that there was a screening committee for.
You have to look at people's character, you have to look at their ability not only to marshal the troops inwardly, but to attract people to the organization and of course to attract people of international standard with good repute.
Based on the screening process, current political leader Dr. Keith Mitchell, who has been at the helm of the NNP since 1989, will not be contesting the position.
I told Sister Kate a while ago, I said, Kate, I feel like I'm happy father listening to the team tonight. I feel fortunate.
The 2 contesting for the leadership position have launched targeted messages to the more than 250 delegates expected to vote during the internal session of the convention. In her messages, Pierre tells the delegates she will abide by the core principles of the party.
This convention is pivotal. It's not just about choosing new leaders. It's about safeguarding the future of the NNP for generations to come.
Peter David wants a fair fight, so he is calling for unity and transparency ahead of the NNP leadership contest, which is scheduled for Sunday at the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School.
Transparent, democratic contest is not confusion. It is not fighting. It is a sign of a strong and functioning movement. There are people who would want to show it up as that. I detest any fanning of the flames of tribalism or division. The other campaigns don't have to lose for my campaign to win.
Cherry and Blackman, Stephen, GBN News.
We now bring you these international reports.
The Georgian parliament, the focal point of these protests. Demonstrators gather here every night at the end of the working day. It's around 8 p.m. here local time, and this is when people start filling up this area of Rustaveli Avenue, which is closed off for traffic. They gather here, and then tens of thousands of people will be joining them through the night, filling up a whole 1 kilometer stretch of street. And police establish a cordon beforehand on those 2 side streets to the right and to the left of Parliament. Now protesters go right up to the police lines, chanting and shouting and pointing laser pens, and police don't respond. And this continues for several hours. And then come the fireworks, the weapon of choice for demonstrators. Now we've seen protesters toss those fireworks over those barricades. This is exactly what is happening right now. And then police bring out armored trucks and riot units from the back and from Liberty Square down the south end of the street. And this is when the face of the protest changes and things start happening quite quickly. Now, peaceful protesters on their own, to avoid trouble, start moving northwest, while fully masked groups move forward. They're ready for a fight. And this happens around midnight. Now, as police get the order to disperse the crowds, the clashes begin. They move in, securing the perimeter and grabbing anyone who stays in their way. Now, masked men with no insignia, we've seen them come in from the flanks and engage in groups. Dozens of protesters end up in hospital or detained or both. Now, police then do several other pushes forward around 50 meters at a time, and out comes the tear gas to clear the area and push further. And this is where the police cordon finally stops, usually, and the battles begin. Protesters with gas masks shoot fireworks and throw back tear gas grenades. Now, instead of running away from them, many rush in to grab these grenades and douse and shake them in cans full of water. Most of the crowd stays back where they can breathe. Now, hours later, protesters are worn out. Most of them will have already left. And the air here becomes basically unbreathable from all of the fumes. Meanwhile, police bring out even more reserves. They patrol these nearby streets and grab anyone they can find. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, the last protesters are pushed back to Republic Square, where they head home only to return again the following night, because there is no dialogue between the sides. Dmitry Medvedenko, Al Jazeera, Tbilisi.
Welcome to The Switch. I'm Elena Casas. Chemical fertilizer has been crucial in growing enough food to keep all 8 billion people on the planet fed. But the manufacture, transport and use of fertilizer is responsible for planet-warming emissions, equivalent to about 1 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide every year. The farming industry needs an alternative, and one is to treat seeds with genetically modified bacteria. Pivot Bio launched that technology just 5 years ago, and CEO Chris Abbott joins me now. Chris, hi. To start with then, why is it necessary to replace chemical fertilizer?
Synthetic fertilizer plays a key role in feeding a growing global population. Now, on the other hand, it has grown to account for about 2.5% of greenhouse gas emissions. And synthetic fertilizer, actually about somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of that is wasted. And that typically happens through weather, volatile weather, whether that's extreme heat, extreme rain. Those events move nitrogen through the soil.
That wasted fertilizer pollutes air and waterways, while some is released as nitrous oxide, a greenhouse gas with nearly 300 times the warming impact of CO2. Pivot Bio is gene editing microbes that naturally capture nitrogen to make them far more efficient.
And what we do is we use microbes, so invisible bacteria you can think of as mini fertilizer plants. Fertilizer facilities sitting on the root of the corn plant. And what happens is that microbe is converting nitrogen from the air. And nitrogen fixation is the process by which we create synthetic fertilizer. We now do it at 1/1,000,000th the size of that microbe embedded on the root system of that plant.
Corn uses more fertilizer than any other crop in the US, and 5% of American corn has already been treated with Pivot Bio's product, although it won't entirely remove the need to use fertilizer.
And our longer term ambition is to take that current 25% of a plant's need, roughly 25% is where we're at today, upwards of 50% in under a decade. And so we think we can make a big dent in this market in the sense that we can continue to provide in-season premium source of nitrogen at or below the cost of synthetic. Today, we're below the cost of synthetic nitrogen. And so as we increase that rate of fixation, doing that at a lower cost is good for our growers.
Is there a risk, though, of these gene-edited microbes escaping into the wider ecosystem of contamination?
No, there isn't. And in fact, we start with a microbe that's naturally occurring. So we apply our gene editing tools to microbes that naturally live on the root system of corn plants and have that gene that can fix nitrogen, right? That process that I mentioned, converting nitrogen in the air to ammonia. We then make it happen more consistently and at a higher rate. And what happens is we basically tune them to run a marathon at a sprinter's pace. Just like I couldn't do that, our microbes end up dying off before that plant even reaches its mature states.
Pivot Bio says the gene-edited microbes die and break down naturally in the soil. While that was enough to persuade regulators in Washington, the company can't sell its products in Europe, where gene-edited crops are banned.
We do not introduce new DNA to the microbe. And so our products are all approved as gene-edited novel crop nutrition products. In Europe, they don't allow gene-edited yet.
Farmers, Chris, in many countries are often key lobbyists against net zero policies because they feel that they're being targeted by governments' carbon-cutting attempts. Do you think that technology like yours can help get farmers on board?
We do, and I've worked very closely with some of those groups, and I'm empathetic to the position that they're in. It's not the grower's job to save the world while other folks pollute it. We have to work together with these solutions. The growers are part of the solution that we need to get after here as a group. It's a tough business to be a farmer. And so how do we get the right technology at the right cost structure so that it's both good for the grower as well as good for humanity and the planet? And solutions like ours are there. We are there. This is cheaper than synthetic fertilizer, and it's good for a grower. So we need more solutions like ours coming together to help those growers.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were:
NEVLEC considers other renewable energy options whilst geothermal is pursued. Burning scent forces a shutdown of electrical grid in St. Kitts.
Update on dengue and arboviral diseases in St. Kitts and Nevis and the Caribbean. St. Kitts and Nevis carnival preparations heating up for Sugar Mass 53. Guyana President announces 10% retroactive salary increase for public servants. Political leader of the New National Party and leader of the opposition in Grenada, Dr. Keith Mitchell, appears to be bowing out of frontline politics. Tbilisi protests demand Georgia election rerun and EU talks as police and protesters adapt tactics.
Thank you for listening.